Uh-oh. Everybody get the share there?
Yes.
All right. Welcome to Tribe Talk, where we come together as a group of like-minded rider coaches and people with certainly more in common than we do have in differences. Tribe Talk is a dialogue with rider coaches to enhance communications and help develop an improvement culture within the tribe. Sharing experiences and ideas, and generally just having a good time with the people that we like to hang out with. The disclaimer, so that everybody understands up front, is this is independent. It's an event that is not sponsored by anybody, any place, any organization. Regardless of the people who show up, it's just us talking one-on-one, and it's all about the improvement for the tribe. All right, Tribe Talk etiquette. I won't read it to you. Please take a second and quickly scroll down through there. If you haven't already, please put your name up on your screen or where you're from so that we know who we're talking to, and it just helps to develop a better form of communication. When we talked about things tonight, remember that if you're talking a specific jurisdiction or context, it's good to let everybody know that it's different from something that we would expect to be normal. And then if you have difficulties, please by all means log off, come back in, and we'll be waiting for you or moving along. Tonight, we have two topics. The first one is hosted by Mark Wise, and it's called the High Challenge Bro Threat Challenge. And then we'll follow it up with Carol Metter and range exercise number 9. A little change tonight, questions from MSF with Dr. Ray Oakes, and then some parting shots before we go. So with this, you ready to roll into this, Mark?
I think so.
Okay, I'll stop sharing, and if you have slides to share, you are more than welcome.
Okay, so let's see.
There we go. You are good.
We're good?
Yes.
Okay, so unfortunately, I don't get to see presenter view, so everything's going to be a surprise to me. Okay, so when I was asked to talk about something, initially I wasn't quite sure, and then the teaching environment was something that popped into my head one day, and the challenge of creating a high challenge, low threat environment. It's something that we talk about a lot, but I think takes a lot more thought and planning than is often put into it. And while we think we're hitting on it, I don't think we're quite getting there. So the start is looking at facilitation. You know, from the Rider Coach Guide, it tells us that literally that means to make easy. And it's the essence, I think, of creating a high challenge and low threat environment. High challenge largely comes from the content itself. So we're presented with that, and that using appropriate challenge level is what keeps our participants involved. If the challenge is too high, they disengage easily because they don't know what's going on. If the challenge is too low, they're bored, and they start thinking about riding motorcycles instead. And then the low threat is the part that we have to work at, and that addresses the environment that we're creating. And so, some questions. So what comes to mind when you hear high challenge and low threat?
Carol here from Missouri. The low threat means we want to keep that safe learning environment for our students, but still we want to challenge them and help them to improve their skills.
Okay. What else comes to mind?
It makes me think of the opposite. It kind of comes to mind. Well, what high threat? What are the negatives?
And we're going to look at that. Okay. Other thoughts?
When someone feels threatened and a fear comes in, then it inhibits their ability to learn.
Okay. Yes, definitely. Let me put up another question. And that doesn't mean the first question's done. This is just an additional question. So what are some general ideas about the high challenge part?
Well, Mark, to me, this is Dennis in St. Louis. High challenge to me would be if you think one of your students has got the potential to be pushed a little bit to try to challenge themselves and still be safe, I would look at possibly doing that.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the, go ahead.
I was going to say along those lines, I kind of agree with that we want to, there's riders that are coming in that have some experience. We want them to feel like they're getting something for their money, so to speak. And so we want to elevate their training a little bit, maybe, as far as the feedback we give them so that they don't get bored, as you said before.
Right. Okay, let's add this. Maybe this will maybe this has more meaning. What comes to mind when you think of keeping things low threat, that low threat environment?
This is Josh from Massachusetts, and when I think of low threat, I think of, a coach versus the old school word of instructor, or being a help agent, kind of a guide, more than kind of an instructor that sometimes could come as a threat, I guess, to a student.
Why do you think that sort of thing happens?
Could be the way that somebody's perceived, and it kind of gets the student really worried about how they're doing in that type of situation.
Right.
Ed here. When I think of low threat, when you first mentioned, I thought of non-judgmental. You're not being judged out there. So with the high challenge for them is they're learning both a mental and a physical skill at the same time, which is challenging. And then the low threat, you're not in a judgmental way. So empathy, I guess you would say, and knowing the students individually, because different students need to hear different things for it to be effective.
Okay, so it's more inviting.
More what? I'm sorry?
More inviting?
Correct. Inviting, that's a good word. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Keith Valenzuela here in Nebraska. When I think of low threat, I also think about the various skill set of each individual student. One person's low threat might be a high threat to somebody else. So I do my best to match it according to their skill set and keep it user friendly, if you will. I don't want to have them terrified to the point where they're locking up, but make it a warm fuzzy for them. Maybe stretch them just a little bit, and then when they have that success, then go on from there.
Okay, good. Any other ideas on the?
Yeah, it's Lynn from New York again. Besides the emotional low threat, I think it's important that students feel physically low threat, that we've created an environment where they have confidence that maybe in us that we're going to help keep them safe.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Jeff from Bowling Green, Kentucky. I think one of the higher challenges for me is to keep the I and me statements out of the conversation in the class.
Like that, yes. Okay, so you see the next question that came up, when low threat isn't met, what sort of things do you notice happen in class? What cues you in, or us in, that it's not happening.
You might notice that the student might be getting a little bit anxious or not acting quite normal in some ways, where they have to you have to find ways to get them to calm down a little bit and relax. You
Okay,
can't tell them to relax.
right. Relax. Relax now.
I use take a deep breath.
Okay.
I think maybe communication stalls. You're doing a lot of the input, and you're not getting a cohesive team type of feeling when low threat's not met.
Okay. And then as we become more involved, maybe it fosters that not quite low threat environment even further.
Sure.
Let's see. So when you notice low threats missing, what are some ways that we can reestablish that environment?
Keith, here again, I will usually just ask them, what wall are you facing, so we can assault it together, if you will. You know, what's the barrier? How can I help you get past the barrier, and then address it and see if he can't get him through that. And sometimes, very rarely, it could potentially be the rider coach themselves. Like my partner might have a different outlook toward that student, and might not be doing a thorough connection with them, if that makes any sense. So one coach might actually be able to communicate with them better, and that's a time for both coaches to come together during the break and just put your heads together and say, okay, how can we make this a win for them so we can lower their their stress level.
Right. Okay.
Dennis here in St. Louis, one thing I think I could do there with the low threat is give them some positive feedback of any kind that you could feel would help them, push them a tad bit more. Everybody's going to be scared going into this. They want to get that, get their ideas going better and feeling safer on a bike and getting more comfortable on a bike.
Okay.
We can back off completely at a reflection time, and both coaches can go throw some cones and designate somebody to facilitate the reflection on their own.
Okay, so now I'm going to do a little bit of a change with the questions. So similar content. Define a high threat, high challenge, low threat learning environment.
This is Mark from Florida. I would think that
Okay, I can't hear you, Mark.
Keith from Nebraska again. That question, just reading that, to me, it just says fun. Keeping it fun, being relatable to them, being approachable yourself. First time in the classroom, everybody's wondering like, oh boy, what did I get myself into? And just make it to the point that you're relatable, keep it lighthearted, and then you can go from there. But that's what that means to me personally.
Okay. What's a key ingredient of the high challenge component of class?
This is Deb from Alabama. I think that part is knowing your students, what your students need.
Okay.
Dennis here in St. Louis along that line, Debbie just said, know, if anything, about what kind of a prior experience they might have had riding a motorcycle, if at all. Or do they even know how to ride a motorcycle with a standard transmission, as an example?
Okay.
Learning
So
will be meaningful to them.
Yeah, so what's critical to creating and maintaining a low threat environment?
Dave in Nebraska, Mark. I think it's being able to read your audience, read the students.
Okay.
Along those lines, Carol here, knowing how your students learn, because not everybody learns the same way. And sometimes they need to look at your range cards before the exercise. I've had students like that where they need to read it for themselves first.
Okay. What factor of a low threat environment makes it best? Why do we want that low threat environment? What's the key factor for that?
This is Deb in Alabama. To me, one of the biggest factors is if they feel it too much of a threat, they tend to shut down.
Okay. So what's the key to high challenge, low threats effectiveness?
A good part of it is us being prepared, professional, courteous, non-threatening, good gauge of character and personality and learning style. All that ties together, but they need to be relaxed, that their brain is not centered on how do I please this coach, as more as how do I learn to become a better rider.
Okay. What's gone wrong when we don't have that environment?
We've failed our students.
And we failed ourselves too.
Yes.
So what do you do to correct that situation?
Keith in Nebraska, I think it's important for us to remember that it's not so much about us. It's about doing what we can to relate to them, and to do what we can to put ourselves behind their eyes and realize how were we when we first started to ride, and kind of keep that in focus.
Okay. So now, moving on, between the two sets of questions, there are essentially two different sets of wording. What changed between the first set and the second set? Anyone notice?
It seemed like the questions changed from the student side to the coaching side.
Okay. What else do you see having changed? Add another question. Notice any change in the threat level of the questions between the first and second set? No?
Mark, Dave in Nebraska. In general, I would say the first set seemed like questions and were putting us on the spot. The second slide, well, it was a restatement. It was more of a statement of fact as opposed to a question, not demanding an answer, but looking for an answer. I mean, honestly, when you don't have an opportunity to look at the two of them, it's a little difficult. Yeah. But I felt more relaxed on the second slide with the 7 statements, if you will. They didn't seem as much like questions or putting me on the spot.
Okay. Yeah, that was one of the risks I realized in putting this together, was that since the questions were primarily the same topics, the first set could have the effect of priming everyone for the second set. So I don't know if there's an easy way to jump back here. I'm going to take a big risk and possibly mess this all up? So there's the first set of questions. Could everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Got it.
And then there's the second set. Go back. First set.
This is Michelle in Ohio. There are different, to me, seems to be personal, more guided toward what a person thinks, and the other is more toward a specific answer.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was working towards. Because yeah, on the second set was the challenge level was lower, part and partially because the first set had already addressed it. I'm going to go to my next slide. So in utilizing high challenge and low threat, what sort of advice do you have, all of you, in with regard to maintaining an appropriate challenge level? I know it's partially it's given to us because we have the curriculum, whichever curriculum we're using.
Well, Mark, Dennis here in St. Louis with the curriculum using maintaining the appropriate level of challenge, to me, that would still be the students' experience, if any, that they would have in this. On riding a bike, I should say.
Okay. And then let's see, what about the third question there? What advice do you have with regard to creating a low threat learning environment?
Well, I mean, there's easy stuff like don't shout at people. You know,
Where's the fun in that?
Have a pleasant have a pleasant demeanor and be encouraging. Someone mentioned that earlier. You know, to give props where you can.
Okay, so how does that benefit us and our students, our class participants?
Well, no one likes getting yelled at, number one. So at least I don't think anyone likes getting yelled at. So that just makes the atmosphere a little bit more friendly. And then, you know, if they're always doing something and never getting any positive feedback, that's a little bit demoralizing. So, you know, can give them a little bit of a psychological boost.
Right.
You want your students to feel comfortable that they can come and talk to you at any time or ask you any questions that would help them in their progression of their learning.
They also need permission to make mistakes.
Right.
I love it when I make a mistake during a demo. I use it as a learning experience for them.
Been there.
Have a comment in the text chat from Michelle Mather, and it says, be relaxed, enjoy the time with your students. I think authenticity is very important.
Yeah, just being balanced and prepared, non-threatening, that relaxed alertness, and just smiling. Smiling, and you know, is the easiest nonverbal way to help disarm people and to make them feel comfortable. And we don't realize that, you know, if you go out in middle public, you know, everyone's got their masks on, right? It's kind of hard to see the smiles, but you know, your face shows it, and it really does help to make people more relatable and more open to what you're saying. And then, you know, focusing on the positive, but also saying, hey, why don't we just do it a little bit better? We'll do this, okay? Do that, that was great. And then just that micro kind of like incremental kind of coaching along with positive reinforcement.
Okay, so any other specifics?
Yeah, I would, this is Jeff from Bowling Green again. One of the things that I would do, offer for number one is to listen and observe the students in the class as a whole, how they're interacting with each other, the comfort level they are, both in the classroom and on the bike. And then talk to my co-coach about the observations.
Okay, and one of the differences I had between the first and second set of questions, the first set that was designed to get things rolling, just jumping back to those, they very much are questions about what you think. They're about what the students, what do they think, and what do they think and how do they feel about it, and provides a lot of opportunity for their own personal input. Where the second set, I sort of refer to it as it provides the opportunity to be wrong, in which it focused more on content. And sometimes to start off with questions like this can be difficult until the students are comfortable with the environment because they're not sure of the answer yet. And so nobody wants to, well, few people want to give an incorrect answer. So a lot of times they'll hesitate on these, where this set allows, doesn't require complete answers and allows for different points of view and for differing experience levels, different backgrounds. And so my last slide is a note to me, and it's that patience is probably the most important thing I need to remember. And that, yeah, my observation has been that anytime I try something new, I need to try it at least 3 times without changing it to know if it's worth keeping or revising. Because if I keep changing it, I'll never know whether the original idea was a good idea or not. So plan and work.
Mark, that word of advice for Dennis here in St. Louis, patience. Yes, depending on the class, you may need to have some patience. In other classes, you really need to have a heck of a lot of patience depending on the student or students.
Right. And this in particular is patience to me. It's that I need to be patient with myself, because I may think something's a great idea, and I may go out and try it, and it may work great, and I'll keep doing it without realizing that it just worked great with that class. Or it could fall flat on the first class, and I may think, oh, that was a terrible idea, and it was just the wrong class. So I need to be patient as I'm working and making changes and evolving. The patience to keep trying things, be persistent.
I'm not going to go through and read everybody's comments on the group chat, but there are some really great ones out there. So if you're multitaskable, pull up your group chat and look at what other people are saying, because it really adds to the conversation.
I don't think I can see that. So that was my last slide. So I'm going to undo sharing. So I think it's back to you, Don.
Everybody, a round of applause for Mark Wise.
Mark.
Great topic. And with that, we'll just do a quick segue over to Carol Metter at your discretion. Carol.
I'm working. I'm trying to get
I'm
it to
sorry.
share my screen.
I was trying to find you in the group. It's like the Brady Bunch.
Okay.
And your screen sharing is coming up. There
we go.
There you go.
Okay. We're going to talk about exercise 9. How many people think they overcoach this exercise? Oh, everybody's going to be quiet on me.
I used
Currently
to.
overcoach or overcoached for decades?
Yeah.
Overcoached for decades, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are the 3 maneuvers in this exercise?
U-turn, turn from a stop, and S-curve.
Okay. Well, Exactly. So how much time is spent on each one of these, do you think?
Same.
Maybe as much time as the student needs, depending on overall time available for the whole exercise.
Okay.
Time spent by us or time spent by the students?
Time spent by the
That's where I'm
students.
going with it, Mark.
Okay.
Time spent by the students, because as a coach, you do not need to elaborate too much on them, because you don't want to overcoach them.
Okay. So range management. What are the coaching positions in this exercise? Does anybody know what the coaching positions are?
Yes, at the start gate, Sarah from Wisconsin here. At the start of the line, at the middle of the range, and at the perimeter turn.
Okay, if you were to pull from the Rider Coach Guide, which position should we start at for coaching?
Definitely in the middle. We want to make sure that path of travel is down before anything.
Okay. Has anybody just spent a little bit of time making sure they got the path of travel right, and then gone to the next coaching position and see what happens with the students on the U-turns?
It's pretty sweet. Sorry, it's Michelle from Ohio. It's pretty sweet. They
It
do.
is.
They seem to do a lot better.
When we step away from that and let them figure it out on their own, it's just wonderful to watch for me. What about the importance of teaching that turn from a stop?
I've noticed they seem more relaxed because they've done it a couple of times. So it kind of gives them a chance to practice it again. But also there's a couple other things. So even if they mess up on it, they're like, okay, they don't feel as bad as they did before. I noticed they kind of let their guards down. They tend to have a little bit more fun on it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the students are less nervous about the U-turns when we walk away a little bit from them?
Yes.
That's
Keith from
definitely
Nebraska.
sure.
Keith from Nebraska, yes. Usually for this exercise, I have this in my head. One of my mentors encouraged me to, when I was first starting out in this, to observe twice, coach once. Leave them alone to figure out the path of travel unless there's something really major happening. And then later on, they'll eventually tie it in and become more proficient. And of course, he can coach here and there, but I found that just observing twice, coaching once, let them go through 3 passes, if you will, and then fine tune them and not hover over them makes a world of difference for them.
I like that, Keith. Anybody else have anything to input on the range management?
I think it's important to keep the lines balanced because of the possibility of the student coming out of the perimeter turn, running into the back of the line at the U-turn.
That's even more critical on a compact range. Dennis can attest to that, right?
Oh yeah, I could do, because you, especially when you got to do that serpentine turn. Some people that freaks them out completely versus the S turn.
Okay. So now let's go into evaluating and coaching. If you notice, what I did was there are 3 general, they're under each exercise in our RCG. There's the general, there's the range management, and then there's evaluation and coaching. So what do you think are 3 good points about evaluation and coaching?
Well, as somebody else said it before, one of the other coaches, I don't remember who it was, says, you talk to them briefly, and give them positive feedback on a couple things, and you leave them alone. Don't overcoach them, especially on the perimeter turns. Watch them once or twice and leave them alone.
Okay. What should be done before starting this exercise?
This is Deb in Alabama. We give them an opportunity to walk the exercise because some people, even writing the demo, they can't quite get it in their head. And then back in staging, we start singing Easy Like Sunday Morning so that they can get a song that will relax them some.
Need to reacquaint them with
Peter
the
from,
clutch.
this is Peter from Georgia. Friction zone is real important to start off the day before we start anything. And just, I usually tell the students, so let's see if it's still there, and practice that before we turn them loose.
That's actually part of our what we should be doing per the range cards too.
Correct.
Anybody get primary controls as well?
Nobody had mentioned those, Sarah. You want to elaborate?
On the cards, it says to, I don't have my cards in front of me. It says to go over the primary controls and the friction zone.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking about the when you first thing in the morning on the second day, that's where you do the rocking back and forth using the friction zone a little bit. Give them and with their head and eyes up, looking forward, so they get that mindset back in their head again for the second day.
No. Okay. So what are the 2 ways that the Rider Coach Guide says that they can successfully complete a U-turn?
Just faster with more lean and slower with minimal motorcycle lean.
Yes. And actually that's on page 91. It's bullet point 3 under evaluation and coaching. And then here's one that I really think is the one thing that I really brings through to me. How much coaching do you provide during this exercise?
Dave in Nebraska, Carol, I like to go with minimalist, as little as possible.
Good to hear from you, Dave.
Thanks, Carol. Nice to hear you too.
I try often to just keep it almost conversational with the riders who are in line. Well, the final position is usually riders in line for the U-turn, and just asking them how things are going and what they personally need to work on, because I can coach them on something that isn't what's their focus, because I'm not riding the bike, so I can't tell exactly what they're doing.
And they don't even know you're doing it, do they, Mark?
No, they tell me what they're doing.
I like them to look at the other riders and you know, point out, kind of like we do in other exercises that are split. You know, what are you seeing here? Did you see a head turn? What happened when that rider looked down? You know, and kind of point out some things, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, that happened to me too," and they pick up on that. I think I kind of like to get to that point where I can get to the head of the line. Hopefully everyone isn't getting lost and we can get to the head of the line sooner, because I think there's a lot of value in coaching from there. You know, it doesn't distract them while they're doing the exercise. You're not coaching them while they're doing that. I kind of watch their progress and they loop back around. I say, hey, I noticed on the other side that you did X, Y, and Z. Why don't you try this time, and send them on their way.
Mm-hmm. Good points. Was anybody else trying to chime in?
Oh, this is Michelle in Ohio again. It also helps that every once in a while they'll tell on themselves, oh, I should have turned my head more, or I should have done X, or should have done Y. And that helps too.
I love it when they start self-evaluating.
That
Keith
makes
in
it easier because then I don't have to remember what they did last time. They'll tell me.
Yeah. One of my favorite questions is, what can you do better this time? Show me.
Right, and sometimes I'll get a response to that. They'll start giving me a whole list, and that gives me an opportunity to realize that they're overloading, and I can tell them, no, just pick one thing. You don't have to change all of those things. Pick one thing to do better.
Okay.
Keith in Nebraska here. I try, in fact, well, I will not coach them while they're riding. They're busy learning a motor skill, and usually talking to them can interrupt their learning process. I'll coach them when they stop. But what's funny is that you can tell if they're getting more comfortable, because somebody here mentioned it. They'll self-evaluate themselves. They'll blow the U-turn box and they'll chuckle. They'll say, I messed it up. And that tells me they are more comfortable with the skill to the point that they can now do several things, verbal and the motor skill.
Very good points. Sometimes I even tell my students, don't worry about the lines. I want to see you do 2 U-turns, 1 in each direction. And once they get comfortable doing that, then they start tightening them up.
Very good point, Carol. I've done that myself before.
Yeah, the lines and cones are more for us than they are for the students. Okay.
This is an exercise.
Go ahead.
Where I find myself being particularly conscious of giving positive feedback, because I think it's the one that gets in their head so much and makes them feel self-doubt. So trying to be positive, they're doing right, I think helps counteract that a bit.
Yeah, and that's right. Being positive with them, and also sometimes taking that step back and letting them figure it out on their own a lot of times really helps them a lot. I've noticed teaching on a full-size range solo that those students really get it, because I can't be everywhere at once. So, does anybody else have anything to add in?
I just say, don't you love it when they put it all together and they got the right speed and they get their counterweight, and all of a sudden their turn, gets shorter by about 2 feet. The expression on their faces is the best.
It is the aha moment. That's what I love.
Isn't that what they call an aha moment?
That's what I just said, Dennis. Aha moment.
Well, I was being a little bit more diplomatically correct there, Carol. Give me a break here.
You can tell we teach together every once in a while.
Not if I can help it.
Hey, Carol.
Yes, Ray.
Carol, Ray Gollin here. You touched a little bit on a little question I had about full-size range with smaller classes, where maybe you're teaching solo on a full-size range. And I was wondering if anyone's had some experiences with this, teaching 6 or less than 6 by yourself, specifically in this exercise. And do you maintain the full path of travel during this time, if you have, let's say, 4 students?
Ray, when I teach in that situation, I set up half the range.
Half the range, yeah. Okay.
When I teach a solo on a full range, I still use full path of travel. It's the same thing, both sides, and it just gives them more practice. They're not transiting across the range without doing anything.
And Ray, I live in New York. I do a hybrid. I set up the full range. I'll start them out. I'll say, when you're done with the circuit on this side, I want you to stop and line up at the start gate on the other side and wait there. And until I know everybody's got the path of travel laid down, we do it in halves. But once they have their groove on, I'll cut them loose to ride it as a continuous circuit. And if I've gotten to that head of the line position, that's a great place to be able to monitor what's going on and give them feedback when they get back to me.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Lynn. I do something very similar. But I'm just, I guess at every exercise, I'm seeing the future for rider education is being able to adapt to having smaller classes and being able to work them in less than ideal situations. I don't know about all of you across the country, but I've experienced smaller classes pretty much all up and down the East Coast. And we need to be able to make stuff like this work.
Ray, this is Dennis in St. Louis. I've taught both in full-size ranges with 2 coaches, 12 students, as well as 6 students, and me coaching on that full-size range where you have to adjust accordingly as far as whether you let them work both sides of the range or one side, as Lynn said, with letting them do one side and park them over there in line for the start gate for the other side. And then the same thing in some ways with a compact range, which I also teach at a compact range. Got to be cognizant of everything that everybody is doing to make sure they're riding it safely is a big thing for me.
Yeah, that's, let me ask you to expand a little bit on the compact range. When you're doing the compact range, the absence of the sharp turn or the turn from a stop is there. And do you do anything to help with that?
Well, Ray, on the turn from a stop, part of the exercise 9 for compact range, we have what is called a serpentine turn.
Yes.
Where you start off doing a right turn, then a sharp left turn, or sharp right turn, and so forth. And that's on both sides of the range. To me, that definitely helps out on a turn from a stop. Because if you had a pair of compact range cards, you'd see what I'm talking about, or unless we have them.
I was going to say, Dennis, this is Josh from Massachusetts. Yeah, that actually even starts from a stop. You're at a stop at the start cones for that. So it's really a right turn from a stop starting into that serpentine.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a little bit harder in some respects versus a turn from a stop on a full-size range. But that's my opinion, for what it's worth.
Good. All right, thank you.
Can I just add to that real quick? A lot of that alone comes down to visual range control, being able to have a wide enough view where you can see both sides of the range, both corners, and then you can observe everything going around in a continuous circuit. Like the more they ride, the better they're going to be, and that's the goal. And if you have a good position, you can really get 4 people moving at the same time, on each side of the range. But it all comes down to that visual control.
If you note on the range cards, all of the rider coach positions are actually so you can view the whole range.
In other words, you move around accordingly where you feel you need to be.
Yeah. But, if you keep yourself where you can constantly head on a swivel is what I like to call it. And I steal that one from my husband. Yes. What? My husband wants to.
Okay. First of all, as an old gray-haired flight instructor, you guys are doing exactly what we do, so I'm pretty impressed. But the other thing I wanted to say, whoever said easy like Sunday morning down there in Alabama, I'm stealing that from my teaching.
That's what good instructors do. We steal from each other. Well, that's all I have, unless anybody has anything else to add.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you very much. That was good. Don't tell anybody in St. Louis I said that to you.
Oh, don't worry. I know Scott's listening, and John is on this one. And I've given the reins over.
Thanks a lot, Carol. Really appreciate it. Big round of applause. I see lots of thumbs up going down. And we'll quickly transition over to our Tribe Talk bonus. If you're ready to ask some questions, Ray, we're ready for you.
Okay, just one really all I want to have people talk about. First, I'll comment on
don't forget going into the U-turn area, U-turn box. That is also a turn from a stop. So that's kind of built into that exercise. We actually move those cones up a little more to force a quick turn coming out of there. So more natural learning, I guess. So the question from MSF is for MSF is what can MSF do to make the BRC, even the e-course, more fun?
I
I'm
think
ready to take notes.
I think
More
the
fun,
BRC itself is a lot of fun.
Yeah, more
I
fun
think
for
it's
who?
already there.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. What can we do to help the let's maybe ask it this way. What can we do to help the rider coach that isn't a lot of fun with the material, create more fun for the student? But think about the e-course too. It's fun for the student, not the rider coach. That's a good question, but for the student primarily.
Level 2 is a lot of fun.
You were on.
I know. Level 2 is a lot of fun. It's fun for everyone.
Well, I'm not disagreeing. I think it's in the eye of the beholder, and it's in the nature of the rider coaching. But let's turn attention to the e-course. Maybe all of you did at least once, but what can be? Is there something can be done there that make it more? I don't want to say YouTube-like, but just again more fun to participate and make the excitement and fun of motorcycling come in instead of, we're serious about safety and we have serious fun. But that initial time are we too serious, or is there some way to make it more fun from a development standpoint?
Right. When we first switched and started using the e-course, I found that students tended to blow through it. It was something they had to get through because we told them to, and the test scores reflected that. So I kind of built into my website just a little bit of emphasis on, hey, take your time with the e-course and enjoy it and get what you can out of it, because you'll need, this is important information, and that skewed things around a little bit. I'd have to go back and look at it some more to think about specific things within the e-course to change.
Hi, Ray Keith from Nebraska. I'm thinking maybe the possibility of making the rider coach available as they do that e-course. Have a set time slot that if they have a question, they can actually reach out to the rider coach that's going to be teaching that class for them. Now, that way it establishes a rapport between that student and the rider coach before they actually show up for the class.
This is Deb in Alabama, and we teach with the state and with the Harley dealership. So we teach the e-course, and then we teach just level 1. And the ones that we've had that did the e-course, the feedback that I've received is they hated taking that e-course. They felt like it was just really long.
When Mark in Arizona, when also at a riding academy program for a year, I included on our post-class survey question about what do you think of the e-course, because for my coaching staff, when I first brought it to them, they generally hated it, and the feedback from the students was very, very positive. And once I started sharing that with the coaches' attitude changed towards it. We still have the students who start the e-course 4 hours before class, but most of the students give us really strong feedback on the course, really positive feedback on the e-course.
I try to bolster that feedback too by referring to the e-course frequently throughout the class. I kind of tie a lot of things that we do in the classroom and on the range to stuff that they've already experienced in the e-course, so that they feel like they're getting value out of it.
This is Trevor up in Montana. That's absolutely critical. If the rider coaches don't value the e-course and show value and refer back to it often, it becomes something the students just had to do, not something they got a lot of value out of.
As a coach, I prefer them do the E-class so that we can do the level 2.
Ray, I don't know if it's possible. This is Dave in Nebraska. If you want to make it more fun, this might be the marketing person in me. I don't know. Have you ever thought of somehow making it a little bit competitive, where the students can compare themselves against others, or maybe qualify for a piece of swag that doesn't cost a lot of money? Maybe that might make them a little more incentivized.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, just to kind of reflect back what Dave was saying, for my students, when I teach psych, I use this, it's a gaming kind of quizzing thing called Kahoot. And so having them fun, like maybe incorporating that into the e-course, because a lot of students nowadays, they like doing games, they like having a little bit of competition, and having that element, maybe having a designated time where that class can do their e-course during a certain period of time, everyone does it, and they're able to kind of compete against each other and see where each other ranks. And then when they come in to take their test, it kind of makes it more fun. It also gets them familiar with the material, and it makes it, more engaging, I would say.
I'll just share a story where inserting a game backfired, just as for what it's worth. When I was in junior high, there was a final exam, and the teacher thought it would be fun to do a word search. So you'd have to do the word search, get the words, and then there was some part 2 where you'd have to use those words in an assignment. Well, this one student was terrible at word searches, and so it kind of killed part 2 for her. And she thought, gee, I got penalized because I'm not good at doing a game. My score, ended up being low because I couldn't get to part 2. So just a caution with that.
Maybe
Here's a question.
Possibly we could look back at the Murphy video and some of the other goofy highlights from the older video days of RSS, and it would be somewhat funny to some people.
It would be to me, Rick.
How about putting some of the Smart Trainer exercises incorporated into the e-course?
Or maybe even just vary the format a little bit. I think it maybe is perceived as a little bit monotonous because it's watch a video clip, answer the questions, and on and on. And maybe if there was some kind of other thing thrown in there or formatted differently.
Carrying on from that, maybe not just watch the video, answer question, but have the questions come up during the video. Pause the video for a second, ask the question, move on with the video.
That's too easy.
Could we inject humor in the e-course somehow, here and there? That might make it a little bit more interesting.
As long as it's not offensive to anybody.
Right, good luck.
Possibly allowing on the first time through for the e-course to be non-sequential. The chapters are in order because there's a pattern to them, but possibly allowing students to jump around in the e-course.
Yeah, I think one of the drawbacks is how state coordinators, state administrators would think about that, especially when they consider their uplines, even clear up to the state legislature as a group themselves, because they don't want to cut to the chase. They want to make it as minimalistic as possible, and fun is not part of the equation. Of course, the fun is in the learning for a lot of people, but somehow that excitement or that energy with not stale information, but just fundamental information, balancing that with not making it too much longer is a challenge, but I appreciate the feedback.
Thanks for asking us, Ray.
Oh, I have all kinds of questions.
Is there any way to speed it up so that if you have a student that can get it, that they can go a little bit faster? because I understand a lot of times they wait until the day of to start taking the class, but then we do have other ones that they struggle because they can't progress forward. You can't keep going. You have to do the video forever, how long it takes. Or
Yeah, I like the idea of a test out function. We thought about that originally, is provide a quiz initially, and if they pass it, they don't need to address the content. But again, that's educationally sound, but then you have some old school people, well, how do you know they know the answer to this or that? It really wasn't covered. So you run into that side of the equation too, but I like that idea.
Yeah, that was kind of something that I was just thinking of, is some people like the video and some people like to read the content. So if there was some sections that you could either watch the video or read the content or even do both, where you don't have to necessarily do the video, it might be something.
Great.
Ray, hey, just Ray Gallen here. I've just seen, I've had an opportunity again to teach in several different states and social setups, but it's amazing how different the e-course is viewed in different, let's say, subcultures throughout the country. And I know you have the challenge of every time you improve something, it has to work in all four corners of this country, which can be challenging. So I would say that if you could continue to make it easy to access, that's very important. And as we add any bells and whistles, sometimes that makes it harder for people with computers that are older or have, some internet connection problems. Just lately, it's been a challenge for me to just even get the student to access. And I don't even know, from a technical standpoint, maybe the student can select two different paths in the e-course, that one might be a little bit more simple, as an old guy, DOS-based, and maybe something else with more bells and whistles, depending on what they have available for them. But just a thought.
Like a choose your own adventure e-course.
Yeah, or a different path that you can go down, because there's some people who have some tremendous connection, great computers, good speed, and then you got people who are almost back to dial-up. So you have to be aware of that. And if we can't get them to access the e-course, it's useless.
If you had different paths and you let it be known that there were different paths, it might even encourage people to come and do the e-course again to experience a different path.
Right.
Depending on how it's set up.
This is Deb in Alabama. My team from my real job, I had 26 employees, and when we started polling them, getting them ready to work from home, more than half of my employees didn't have a computer or did not have internet. And so that was a major problem in real world. I was kind of surprised. And I think that happens a lot, especially to some of the older riders that are coming in. And that's a lot of what we see is 50 and up on some of our classes.
Well, if anybody wants to add anything else, I know we're getting close on time here. Just email me with any ideas you've got. We'll give you credit.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate that very much. And as kind of a going away poll, there's a couple questions up on the screen for those who can see it. Please fill it out. I'll give you a couple minutes. We still have approximately 45 people online. I know everybody may or may not be able to answer the questions. For those who cannot see it, question number 1, there are 6 steps in a model of motor learning. The second step is, and here are your choices. Choice number 1 is attend to feedback. Choice number 2, repeat the process. Choice number 3, formulate a plan to use on the first attempt. Number 4 is make a response. And number 5 is determine the goal. Second question is, motor learning studies have found that movement information is retained in memory in what form? And so the first selection is a picture. Second selection is a thought. Third selection is an image. Fourth selection is a procedure. And the fifth selection is a strategy. We're at about 50% on voting.
You're making us think on this one today.
I thought it was a quiz he was giving us. I'd like to know what the right answers are, Don, after you get your survey results.
We're at 62%. So it must be difficult questions that provoke thought, and that's the real reason for doing this. %. I'll hold off a few more seconds here. Are the wheels still spinning? I know it looks like we have a lot of people on mobile devices tonight. It may not be easy for them to do this. And coming up on 3 minutes, the polls are closed. I'll share the results with those that can see. For the first question, there are 6 steps in a model of motor learning. The second step is formulate a plan to use on the first attempt. So 16 people, 44% got that. Almost evenly distributed across the other 4. For the second question, motor learning studies have found that movement information is retained in the memory in what form? The correct answer is an image. It's the about 25% of the people selected that. The majority answer was a procedure. And that is coming down. Excuse me for a second. I want to make sure that we save that for posterity.
This is Dan. I'm wondering how we could make these end of Tribe Talk quizzes more fun.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that.
You're welcome, Don. Say you're welcome to Ray.
Exactly. So I won't tell you where that comes from until we get through. There's quite a few more questions that we can ask, so I'll leave it at that. And the wrap up. This is what we went through today. Thank you, Mark and Carol, for your input in doing the host. Appreciate that. Remember, everybody, we are always looking for people who are interested in sharing with the group. You can contact me or Rita Liebeck, who seems to be the pushing force right now on getting some of this stuff done. Thank you, Rita. But please, if there's anything you want to share, the more people want to share, the better off we are as a group. I had a few challenges that went out this week in the promotion video. I don't know if everybody got the chance to see that, but the first thing was a Rider Coach challenge. And what's going to happen is next week, we're going to have a special guest giving a presentation, and then we're going to break out into small groups, and we're going to develop a list of the top 10 Rider Coach traits, characteristics, competencies, and abilities from you all. So please get into your Rider Coach guides, the standards document, trainer's guide if you got it, the range cards even may have a hint to some of this, and develop the top 10 list that you would like to share with a small group, and then let's all get together and see where that takes us. So that's for next Sunday, 10 May. The other thing, I know tonight we have a few people that may be involved with a state or military program administration, or perhaps you know somebody that is. I'm trying to get a work group together for us to talk about what we think we can do to improve rider coaches. So I know I'm working with a small work group in Michigan right now. I'd like to broaden it a little bit more and get a larger set of ideas. So if you are in contact with a state or a program administrator of any type, please have them reach out and contact me. I'd greatly appreciate it. Next week, Mr. Dan Pedersen. Thank you, sir. He's going to give us some possible improvements for rider training that came out of his latest version of Riding Smart. And if you aren't aware of the website, please go out and check it out. There's some really great information out there, lots of research to learn from. So it's a little plug for Dan. Dan, would you like to say anything about next week? Okay, Dan, we got muted here. Give me a second.
How about now?
There you go.
Okay, I unmuted myself. Thanks for the invitation, Don. Nothing special to say. I would encourage people to go to our website. I'm managing a 501c3 nonprofit. The acronym is SMARTER, so the web address is www.smarter-usa.org. We're trying to be the one-stop spot for motorcyclist safety research. And my presentation next week, Don asked me to highlight a little bit of the information about rider training. So that's what I'll be doing.
Thank you, Dan. Really appreciate it. And then, as I just mentioned before, the other thing we'll do next week is we'll get into some small groups. We tested it out last happy hour, and it seems to have some promise. So we'll break out in small groups and maybe have some more one-on-one discussions that'll allow us to get to know each other better, and then also push forward on finding out what we think is important about our future rider coaches or current ones. How to help, I can't say it enough. Show up, bring your friends in. We are better together. I'm sure you've heard that a lot lately, but I want to say how much importance comes from us having talks like this. Two of the notes I wrote down tonight, one was from Ray Gowland, was trust and care. And why that is so important, I think, especially with this group that comes online, is there's a certain vulnerability to putting your thoughts out there into a group of such sophisticated people that have different ideas and a great base of knowledge that we can learn from. But if you can trust this group of people that are on here tonight, I think it enhances and improves the tribe. So I recommend that. And then there was also somebody that mentioned stepping back and taking a look at the students from afar. If we can do that with each other, instead of, just naturally thinking that somebody's wrong or that they're absolutely right. If we can step back, listen a little bit more, and then make some better thought processes as a group, we may find that we may learn something. I certainly do. I walk away from this group every time just with my head exploding from the knowledge that I'm gaining here. So once again, mentor somebody or be mentored by somebody. Thank you for showing up to Tribe Talks, and we'll see you next week, 3 May, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Don, thanks a lot. Enjoyed it immensely, everybody. Be safe. Stay healthy.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Night. See everybody
Thank you.
next time.
Good night.
Great.